Welcome to a Second Chance at Life podcast. I'm the host, Arvilla Beckworth, and welcome to another episode. This week, I wanted to get real deep and I want to talk about depression. We may know someone that have it, maybe even ourselves may see some symptoms. But instead of me giving you information that I've seen on the internet, I wanted to get right to the source. Let me go ahead and bring in Michelle.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge of a sensitive subject.
Mhm.
Um, if you would mind, just please tell my listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yes. Born and raised in Denver. Currently, I am a mental health therapist in LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor. And I'm also working at a facility working with insurance and basically advocating for mental health patients. I've always had an interest in learning about people, learning about how the mind works. And so that's why I decided to major in psychology. So I went to CSU in Fort Collins and I did my psychology degree. After graduating, I decided that I still wanted to do something with people, wanted to find a career that allowed me to help people. And so that's when I went to Regis University, and then I pursued my master's in mental health counseling. And during that time, I started working a lot with mental health patients directly. So I was working at a lot of residential facilities. I did a lot of work with eating disorders. I've been working with eating disorders for about 6 years now. And if anyone knows anything about eating disorders, you know that it has a lot of comorbidities. So a lot of people with eating disorders have depression, have anxiety. So from there, I was able to gain a lot of experience with depression and anxiety. And currently, right now, I'm just working on building a private practice and kind of, me and you were talking about earlier, just kind of normalizing mental health, especially in the Black community. That's kind of where I am right now.
Well, that's awesome. I knew you was going to school for a while, but you've been going to school for a while. So now I see
Yeah.
all the credentials and everything you have really worked hard for. And I want to say that it is a blessing to see, a young person that really strives and cares and push forward to go after what she wants. So you are really someone that I even look up to because I didn't finish college. So to see that you kept pushing and pushing, no matter what, you were going after what you wanted. So congratulations. And I hope that private practice comes very soon.
Yes, it's so far. I got a little caseload, and I'm liking it. So I'm just taking baby steps, but I'll
Yes.
get there eventually. Where I
All
want to be. Yes.
right. I love it. And as we talk about mental health includes emotional, psychological, and social well being.
Mm-hmm.
It determines how we handle stress and how we feel, think, and how we act.
Mm-hmm.
Why is mental health important for our overall health?
It's important because it really has a big impact on your life. Having bad mental health can really impact your motivation. It can make you not want to get up in the morning. You have no desire. Nothing is really inspiring you, and it can also impact your work performance. It can really impact how you deal with conflict. People with bad mental health are more likely to lash out, and you don't deal with conflict as well as you could. And also, it can also impact your health. It can cause heart disease. It can cause diabetes and strokes. So really, it's a fundamental part to your health. Mental health and physical health kind of go hand in hand.
And as women, as you know, we wear many hats, whether
Mhm.
working long hours at work, caring for others, or trying to find time for ourselves. The
Mhm.
demand of life makes it hard to keep our mental health in check. Can our mental health change over time?
It definitely can. Mental health can be impacted by a lot of different factors in your life, a lot of drastic changes, stress. You could be under a lot of pressure at your job if you have a stressful job, being a single parent, or being a caretaker for someone. Any kind of major life changes can impact your mental health. And so if you don't have the ability to deal with these changes, it can definitely have a negative impact on your mental health.
And with mental health, is it something that's permanent? Like if I've been diagnosed with either anxiety or depression, once I start the healing process, is it something that can eventually come back, or is it something that I can be pretty confident may not come back?
It really depends. It can be, if you don't really do, I guess, what you can to treat it, it can be a long lasting thing. But it's definitely something that you can overcome if you take the steps and reach out for the support that you need. But really, it really kind of depends on the person.
And how common is mental illness? I know we don't talk about it a lot, so we don't know how common it is in the Black and Brown community, but how common is it and what is the cause?
It is very, very common. I think statistically they say like 970 million people worldwide have mental disorders.
Wow.
I'm a true believer in, if you don't have it, you know someone who has it. Like it's
Right.
very common. And in my line of work, I've seen the most successful people. It doesn't discriminate. That's the thing about mental health disorders. It does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what your background is, what your race is, socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter. I've seen the most successful doctors, lawyers, Ivy League students with depression and mental disorders. So it's very common. And it can be caused by many different things. A lot of it can be genetic. You know, if you have a family history of depression, you are at greater risk of developing it. It's basically like a chemical imbalance in your brain, so it can be genetic. Things like abuse, if you have a traumatic experience, that can cause depression. Certain medications can also cause mental disorders.
Oh, wow.
Conflicts, experiencing death or loss, substance abuse, serious illnesses, any kind of personal problems can really result in a mental disorder.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. And I didn't even know about the medication. I guess
Yeah.
that was something new that I've never heard of. Huh.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
even along the lines of talking about that, the misconception is that being sad for a long time is depression. Please set the record straight on what depression is.
Sadness is definitely a symptom, but really it can look differently for everybody.
Mhm.
The signs to look out for include kind of lack of motivation, hopelessness. You know, you could just be having really a bad like sleeping hygiene. Your sleep, you know, you're not really getting enough sleep, or you're not really wanting to eat as much, you know, or you're overeating, stuff like that. You can kind of look out for. And I always say, you know, especially for your children, if
Mhm.
their room is messy, to pay attention to those little things, because when you are depressed,
Uh-huh.
then you know you don't really have motivation to take care of yourself in your environment. So those are things to kind of look out for. I don't think people really have realized that like a messy room is a symptom. You know, just hopelessness, lack of motivation.
Mhm.
It can look differently for a lot of people. And also you can be very irritable.
Mm.
Like to be irritable when you're depressed.
Mhm.
Yeah, it looks differently for a lot of people.
And even as a parent, how will a parent, I know you said one was messy room, but what other
Mhm.
factors as a parent can you recognize in your child? Because we are in a society where
Mhm.
electronics now takes their attention.
Yeah,
So you can't recognize the signs as easy as you would
yeah,
if maybe if you're around your kid a lot, or maybe you work a lot of hours, so you can't even identify what goes on in your child's day to day. What are
yeah.
some things that we can kind of look out for even in our young children that are coming up?
I would say if you notice your child having a lack of interest in things that they're usually interested in doing,
Okay.
that could be a sign that something is wrong. Isolation. Sometimes there's a disinterest in socializing, because you're dealing with something on the inside. You don't know how to soothe it. You're hurting on the inside. And I think social media is a big factor as well. Social media, I mean, is it impacts a lot of people's mental health. So I think, you know, I don't know how parents monitor their child's social media use, but that's definitely something to consider.
Okay.
It definitely can impact someone's mental health for sure.
Okay.
And also school performance when it
Mm.
comes to children. You know, if their grades are slipping um, in an abnormal way, you know, they're like distracted during school or something, definitely something to check up on.
And what are some signs and symptoms we need to look for in ourselves or loved ones?
The lack of interest is a huge sign. You
Okay.
know, when you have a loved one who likes to go out and likes to socialize and likes to do different hobbies, and
Mhm.
they no longer have an interest in doing those things, that is a huge sign that something could be wrong. Um, and difficulty concentrating, you know, just a lack of motivation. Because when you're depressed, you feel very hopeless. You know, you don't really, there's not really anything pulling you to get up. A lot of oversleeping. Some people just don't want to get out of bed in the morning, you know. And if you know your loved one really well, you can kind of tell when things aren't right.
All right.
And
Okay.
it's definitely worth at least trying to check in. You know, some people don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And you can suggest maybe they go elsewhere. But the hardest part sometimes is admitting that something is wrong. And for a lot of people, especially in the Black community, we don't really want to admit that. You know, we're supposed to be strong all the time.
Right.
And we have to normalize that it's okay not to be okay sometimes. And you have to learn how to take care of yourself. That's a big part of it.
And in a couple of my episodes coming up, I talk about high functioning depression.
Yes.
What is that?
So high functioning depression is basically like, so you're depressed, but you're able to maintain your lifestyle. If you're a busy parent, you're running around, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, you're working well, like everything looks fine on the outside. But really on the inside, it's not. And people oftentimes cannot tell that you are depressed because you're so high functioning and you're successful, you're busy, you're doing all these things. And sometimes you can't tell that a person is depressed. And it sucks, but there's definitely a lot of high functioning depression going on out there. Yes.
And do you notice, is it like a certain personality trait with the high functioning depression, or is it anybody that could be affected by high functioning?
I don't know if it's a certain personality trait. I think definitely depends on the person. Maybe it depends on what they have going on. You know, I think a parent, I would think would be more likely to be high functioning because you have that responsibility of your children. And that is like something that keeps you going. And sometimes you don't really have time for yourself when you're taking care of other people. So I would think a caregiver, somebody who isn't, you know, responsible for someone else would likely be high functioning. Just because you have to keep going. You don't really have an option to
stop.
Yeah.
And as I think about depression, like anything, there's usually different layers. And I guess the layers that I'm speaking about, what types of depression are there? Is it like a small to a major, or, you know, what are some of the big ones, I guess, that you can talk about?
So there are a few common types of depression. There's the most common is major depressive disorder. So MDD, and that's, like I said, the most common kind. That's kind of basically when you are feeling under these symptoms more than 2 weeks. So you're feeling kind of loss of energy, you're feeling overwhelmed. And these things kind of last for a really long time. And that's the most common kind of depression that I see. There's another one called bipolar depression. So people who have bipolar disorder, they have a lot of ups and downs. So they have really, really high energy moments in their lives. They're kind of manic and they're just on the go. And then they have moments of really low states where it's low energy. And these people often develop depression. And then there's also the perinatal and postpartum depression, which also I think we probably heard about. It evolves around pregnancy.
Yes.
And typically happens after birth and it could last up to a year or longer. And so basically, you know, after a mother gives birth, she just feels really overwhelmed and stressed. And, you know, it's really a difficult moment for a lot of women. A lot of women experience postpartum depression. And then there's another one that I've heard of a lot is seasonal depression. So seasonal affective disorder, basically, you know, like it's pretty self-explanatory. It depends on the season. So usually, you know, a lot of people get depressed around fall and early winter. And then usually the symptoms subside around spring or summer. That's another pretty common one. There's others too, but those are like the main ones that I'm used to working with.
Okay. And I like the fact that when you broke it down, because I've heard of bipolar. And it was like, even in the community, it was a joke like, oh, he's bipolar, she's bipolar, but no one never knew what bipolar meant. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And so when you finally kind of gave
highs and they go through a lot of lows, they're like really energetic and manic and happy, and then they just switch. And it's just the complete opposite. So, yeah.
Well, see, that gives us clarity. You know, when people use it, I'm like, okay, what do you mean that they're bipolar? I don't understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah,
that's
like
another very common mental disorder. I've seen it a lot. Yes.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
And in what you've seen, how can somebody regain control of their life after being clinically diagnosed with depression?
Just taking action. You have to, you might need a better support network. Like I said, the hardest part is admitting that something is wrong. And, you have to be willing to change some things. You have to change some things, whether it's the people in your life or how you take care of yourself, what your daily routine is. You just have to change some things around, but you definitely can overcome it. But, depression can be very dangerous for people who don't treat it. It can lead you to being suicidal. So it can definitely be bad if you don't take the steps to improve it.
And I know probably in the last year or so, I see more and more stories about younger people taking their life because of depression, which
Yeah.
turned into suicide. And it's like, and that kind of goes back to now where the signs miss, were they saying something? And I read the article, was she Miss USA, a younger lady that
Yeah.
committed suicide, and her mom's like, well,
Yeah.
we didn't know. She had
Yeah.
two different lives. She functioned as normal. We never knew anything was wrong with her.
And
And
that's the thing about social media in general, just like the way people perceive themselves.
mhm.
It's not really how things are oftentimes behind closed doors. And that lady you were talking about, the previous, I think Miss USA,
Mhm.
you would look at her Instagram and think everything was fine. She was beautiful. She was happy. She was this and that. You would think that, but
Right.
really, it could be deceiving. And that's just kind of how it just kind of shows you how common and dangerous, mental disorders can be, especially if you're not willing to reach out for that support that you need.
Right. And do you see that with treatment for depression, like when we get treatment, is
Hmm.
it always medical? I mean, is it always medicine involved, or what other steps that we have? Maybe if we're not a person that
Yeah.
wants to take medicine, is that the only option?
It's not the only option. I would always start with, I call it self-care. So
Okay.
I think people who are depressed need to have better self-care. So that looks like, exercising, exerting yourself in a positive way, getting enough sleep. Sleep is actually a really big factor that contributes to depression. So if your sleep schedule is messed up, you should probably, correct that. Get better sleep. You can go get a massage. You can spend time with people who mean a lot to you. And also, you may have to cut off some toxic people out of your life. So sometimes it's the people around you who are depressing you. And also take a break from social media. If you have to deactivate your Instagram or your Facebook, or just take a step away, because, comparison is a good,
Ooh.
yeah, that can definitely make you depressed, comparing your life to other people's lives, and people flex a lot on social media. People, it's not always what it actually is. And so I think sometimes just taking a step away from social media can actually really improve your mental health.
And I'm glad you talked about comparison because that is a biggie. Even though we may not talk about it on social media, it's hard not to see because you may have friends or family members that just got a new job, just got married, just got a new car, on another vacation, have a beautiful house that they continue to decorate week after week. And then you start looking at your life and you're like,
What the heck?
yeah, like, am I behind? I don't never get to go on trips, and so then internally you do start to pick apart your life,
Yeah.
where areas of your life weren't even broken. You start to tear yourself apart. You start picking yourself apart, making you feel like, is my life even, you know what I'm saying? So you're so right on about comparison, because even for
Yeah.
me, the transparent moment, there was a woman that I was watching on social media, really good high social media influencer, and every week or every day she would show her life. And I looked, and even though it started off as looking as, oh man, I love that life. Oh, she's living the best life. I start looking like, but what's going on in my life?
Yeah.
Why is mine not as exciting? Why am I still not going on this and this? Or why have I haven't reached to this level yet? So I
Yeah.
actually had to remove myself, even though she did nothing to me. It was my own self-esteem that became affected. So I had to unfollow her because I wasn't in a healthy spot at that moment to continue to follow her.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years that she was still doing her thing, I refollowed her. But then I was in a better place mentally, that,
Mhm.
okay, understand that no matter who you're going to see, like you said, it's people's highlight reels. They're not showing you the highs, the lows, the in between. They're showing you the good stuff.
The good stuff.
So I had to get that through my mind. Like, that's not her life every day.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she came online, she had a video where she had broke down. It was like, you know, social media is tough because I have to put up this facade every day just to gain followers, just to gain advertisement, just to gain all this stuff. But deep down inside, I'm hurting.
Exactly.
I'm just dealing with stuff that people don't even know. And then when I seen that, it really brought her down to a human level. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It can be very deceiving. And like the saying, you know, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
It's so true, you know, because you never know what a person's going through. And just because they portray as someone who's just living this fabulous life, you really have no idea what's going on in the background. And oftentimes it's not as glamorous as you think it is.
Right.
So that's why social media can be very, very dangerous because, like you said, we usually only put the good out there. We don't usually show what's going on in the backgrounds. So, yeah. And like you said, sometimes you may have to remove yourself if you have somebody who you're feeling triggered.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was a trigger for me.
You're feeling triggered. Yeah. Yeah.
That is so true.
Exactly.
And another question. In doing so with depression, sometimes it's hard for us to, like you say, recognize our own mess. And we will continue to work thinking it'll go away. At what time should we pull the plug and say, you know what, I need to see a doctor?
I always suggest going to therapy, of course, because I am a therapist. I think that's a big step for people to take. You know, if you're doing the self-care things and you're changing things around your life, but you're still feeling depressed, I would say the next step would be seeking a therapist.
Okay.
And, you know, a therapist can really help you develop some coping strategies like meditation, all these different things that maybe you haven't thought about that could help you with your depression. They can also kind of help you, you know, kind of develop your perspective and kind of get to the root of the issue. And sometimes you just don't know why you're depressed. Sometimes there really isn't a reason. You're just depressed. So I think sometimes when these symptoms linger, even if you're trying different things and you're still feeling depressed, you can maybe ramp it up and seek out a psychiatrist, and they can kind of help you get some medications. There are antidepressants that have been effective. So there are some medications out there that can help you with your symptoms, anxiety and depression. And the most extreme measure that I think I've seen in my career for depression, for people who have depression for a very, very long time, and they've tried all these different medications and they're still depressed, you might want to consider brain stimulation therapy.
Oh, what's that?
So yeah, really, your brain gets stimulated. So there's a thing called ECT, and basically it's electroconvulsive therapy. And basically they put you under anesthesia, and a psychiatrist literally takes a machine and they shock your brain, and it kind of resets your pathways, and it can be effective. That's more extreme. That's more for people who've been depressed for a very long time and nothing else has worked. But there are a lot of different methods out there for people. And I just want people to stay encouraged and to be willing to try different things and know that there are different methods out there for people that could work. Yeah, there's a lot out there for depression.
And I'm glad you talked about that, because in the Black and Brown community, we don't have those conversations. And it's like, you know, what goes on in this house stays in this house. So we don't know that there's help out there. And especially when it comes to seeing a therapist, it was almost shunned. Like, you don't need to go talk to them. Ain't nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
Deal with it. You okay. You know, so I guess, you know, just trying to get over that hump that it is okay to seek help. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to make you feel lack of because you're going to seek additional help.
Yeah, nothing's wrong with it. And some people just want a therapist just to talk to somebody. It's that simple. And it's made me happy because now I've been seeing it being more normalized. And I see people talking openly about their therapist and going to therapy. And that's the way it should be. It should be just a matter of fact. Like, I'm going to therapy, and there shouldn't be any kind of shame that comes with it. Because you don't know what the reason is a person might need therapy, but a lot of people can benefit from it.
Now, have you noticed since the pandemic, or even during the pandemic, that depression and anxiety has increased because of the pandemic? I mean, have you seen more clients during that time frame?
Yeah, I would say, you know, when we were on lockdown, I think for a lot of people that was hard. A lot of people who weren't able to go out and socialize. You know, for us introverts, it was fine.
I'm an introvert.
I was totally fine.
I was good.
But for some people, that really impacted their mental health. And You know, a lot of people lost their jobs. I mean, a lot of people lost their loved ones. A lot of people got sick. So definitely this pandemic recently has definitely impacted a lot of people's mental health. And I even saw a big increase in eating disorders. But that's a whole different subject right there. But yes, definitely, it definitely has. A lot more people are seeking therapy. And I think one thing that the pandemic has taught us is that we can do a lot of things virtually. So right now I'm doing a lot of virtual therapy. And for a lot of people who are seeking therapy for the first time, the thought of sitting face to face with somebody could be really scary and very intimidating.
Right.
So for a lot of people to be able to have therapy from the comfort of your home could be a better option for a lot of people. And it's very convenient. You know, you can pull over in your car, whip your phone out, and have a therapy session. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love how that made it so much easier. Because I mean, I didn't mind going to see a therapist face to face, but like different things like Better Health and other things have been promoting for it to be more audio and visual. And so I think people get more comfortable and more relaxed from their home.
Exactly.
To kind of discuss that. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. I've been kind of asking majority of my guests, have they seen a change since the pandemic? Because beforehand, you really didn't hear about mental health.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, it was out there, but like you said, when we had to sit with ourselves, deal with ourselves, you know, a lot of the stuff that we were dealing with internally finally got exposed to us in our isolation. And like you, being introverts, we was like, we good. This is what we do all the time. I don't have a problem being here by myself. But those that were my extroverted friends was like, hey, this is not good. You know, I got to find out how I can connect, because that connection to other people is my mental health. This is what keeps me going, and being around people, and for them to tell me that I can't or we're limited, it's a big no-no for me. So it was kind of hard to try to relate to people that were struggling where I was comfortable. Others were struggling in that.
See, extroverts, that's how extroverts recharge themselves, is being social. And us introverts, we recharge by being to ourselves and having our moments, you know, that's how we recharge. So yeah, it definitely was hard for a lot of people. And definitely a lot more people are going to therapy now.
I love that. And that's the whole thing I want to make sure that everyone understands, is that never be ashamed of your mental health, because it is yours and it's your journey alone. And if you ever feel like a point that you have to shun yourself from therapy, then yeah, definitely for sure go get it. But I want to normalize it. I want to talk about it and be able to be open about it. So when we talk to our kids are now saying, you know what, my mom takes self-care days. I see her take a moment off to herself to rejuvenate. So now I know that's normal for me to take a self-care day. And until we start showing our kids that is normal, we can break that generational cycle. And I think that's the thing that keeps on happening, because my mom did it, because grandma did it, because great grandma did it. But no one ever gives an explanation why we don't stop doing it. We just keep saying because somebody did it beforehand, it just happens to us. And I want to kind of, like I said, break that cycle and say, no, but it's no longer normal. We're going to break it today. We're going to be the generation that says no longer will our kids have to be dependent on drugs. No longer will our kids be afraid to go to school. You know, no longer should our kids be afraid to express themselves without being chastised by a parent. You know, we should have those open conversations with our children so they can have that safe space. Because I believe a lot of children, with some of the younger girls that I work with, that's their number one complaint. They can't talk to their mom. My mom won't listen to me. My mom, she's the parent, so she tell me this is how it's supposed to be, but I also have a voice. And I want to tell her what's going on with me, but as soon as I tell her, she's too busy. I'm too tired. I don't feel good. So in turn, she now keeps it inside and she doesn't deal with it. And so now she's lashing out at school. She's having unprotected sex at a young age. But she said the whole time, I've been trying to tell my mom what's going on, that I don't feel good. Something's
wrong. That's the thing. Like when you are struggling with your mental health and you don't really have a positive outlet to go for support, you are more prone to turn to maladaptive coping mechanisms. So that's like drug use, or like you said, sex, or whatever it is that in the long term is likely going to hurt you. But that is your coping mechanism. And so that's also another reason why it's important to prevent things like that from happening. Absolutely.
And we were talking about it. What are some coping mechanisms that are negative that you've seen people?
Well, eating disorders is a big one, you know, and drug use is another big one. gambling, any kind of addictive thing, any kind of thing that gives you like instant pleasure. Shopping, retail therapy.
Say that.
I know. But it can be anything that can be overdone, all of those things can become an issue. Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to kind of have you expound on, because it is, when you think about a coping mechanism, sometimes you don't think the things that you do in excess of is something that you're coping with. You may have occasional happy hour, but then behind closed doors, you're drinking excessively, or, it turns it now it's something that you're dependent on, or that's your momentarily high or temporary feeling. But as soon as that comes down, it seems like you crash harder a little bit more than you did before. So you go back to that coping mechanism to kind of get you back to that same place. So it just.
And those kind of mechanisms end up having really negative impacts in your life. If you have a shopping addiction, financially, that's a hardship.
Yes.
Drinking, that can ruin your life, and drugs, all that can ruin your life. And so, that's why it's good to have healthy coping mechanisms. A lot of people don't know what those are.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, that's another good thing why a therapist is helpful, because they can kind of introduce you to some new things that you never thought about. That could be helpful.
Okay.
Yes.
And last, please tell my audience where they can connect with you online.
So you can find me on Psychology Today. So psychologytoday.com is a really popular place for people to seek a therapist in your area. So you can find me on there, Michelle Burney, or you can also reach out to my email, which is mburney, so mburney counseling@gmail.com. And you can reach out to me there, and we can hopefully get you set up for a session. But I definitely recommend Psychology Today for anybody who's seeking a therapist. There are a lot of good options on there. You can kind of read about the person to see if they're a good match for you.
That's a good question. And as we talk about that before we go, if you find somebody and you're with them for a couple of weeks and you don't find a good fit, do you stay with that person or do you leave? Because I know somebody be like, well, I should stay because I didn't give them enough chance to figure it out.
You leave.
Okay.
And if the therapist is a professional therapist, they will understand, and they will, if anything, will help you, refer you to somebody else who might be a good fit. Because if you don't feel like you're connecting with your therapist, or there's too many differences, yes, you should leave and find someone who does, because that's going to make the process easier for you. And most therapists will understand. It's okay.
Okay, well, to make sure, because I don't want somebody to think they find somebody and that's who they're supposed to stay with if it's not working out.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, awesome. And I will make sure that I leave all of Michelle's information in the show notes. I really hope this episode has opened your eyes regarding mental health and depression. It is a topic that is very sensitive. So if you know someone and you're recognizing the signs and the symptoms, be patient and also have leniency on what the person may be going through. Understand that none of us really like to put our business out there. So it may be a moment before they kind of start to open up, but just make sure that you at least check on that person. And if you're the person that's struggling with mental health, please make sure you reach out to someone for additional help. Never do this alone, because we want to make sure that as we listen to each of these episodes, each one brings you something that you can take back and learn from. But mental health, never do this alone. Make sure that you are getting the proper help and treatment you need to better yourself. So until next time, ladies, you guys have a great week. See you next week.